The $3 that stopped a war. The February wind cut through Mulberry Street like a knife through silk, bitter and unforgiving. Vincent Russo stood outside Café Palermo at 11:47 p.m., his Brioni overcoat doing nothing to warm the ice that had taken residence in his chest 3 years ago. At 42, he'd perfected the art of stillness, the kind that made men twice his size cross to the other side of the street. His salt and pepper hair remained immaculate despite the wind, and the scar running from his left ear to his jaw caught the streetlight like a signature written in violence. Behind him, Bobby the Barber Scarpino, Tommy Two Times, and his cousin Marco stood with the patience of wolves waiting for their alpha to give the signal. They'd been standing in the cold for 2 hours, waiting for a single text message that would authorize the execution of Jimmy the Hammer DeMarco, the man who'd put 3 bullets in Vincent's nephew outside a bodega on Spring Street 3 nights ago. Vincent's phone sat heavy in his coat pocket. One word from his inside man, just 5 letters spelling out an address, and the war would begin. The Russo family would answer blood with blood, and Little Italy would run red for weeks until one side bent the knee or bled out completely. This was how it worked. This was how it had always worked. You protected your own. You answered disrespect with overwhelming force. You never, ever let them see you hesitate. Vincent's face had been described by neighborhood old-timers as carved from stone. No emotion, no mercy, just the cold mathematics of survival and dominance. He'd lost something important when they zipped his nephew Anthony into a body bag. He'd lost the last piece of himself that believed in second chances. His phone buzzed once. Vincent's hand moved toward his pocket. You look like you lost something important. The voice was tiny, clear as a bell cutting through the wind and the weighted silence of men preparing for war. Vincent's hand froze. He turned his head slowly, and his stone-carved expression cracked just slightly at what he saw. A small black girl stood 3 feet away, no older than 7, in a puffy purple coat that was 2 sizes too big, and pink boots decorated with glittering unicorns. Her natural hair was styled in twist-outs, each section adorned with small gold beads that caught the streetlight and sparkled like stars against her dark skin. She held a to-go cup from the corner bodega in one small hand and 3 crumpled dollar bills in the other. She wasn't afraid. Every grown man on this street knew to give Vincent Russo and his crew a wide berth. You didn't make eye contact, didn't slow your pace, definitely didn't approach. But this child walked right up to him and tilted her head back to look at his face with the kind of fearless curiosity that only existed in people who hadn't yet learned that some strangers were too dangerous to help. My grandma says hot chocolate helps when people have sad faces, she continued, her voice carrying a slight southern lilt that marked her as not from here. It's $3. I was gonna get a snack, but you look like you need it more than me. She held out both the steaming cup and the money. Vincent stared down at her, his mind trying to process this impossibility. His hand, which had been reaching for his phone to read the text that would start a war, hung suspended in the air between his pocket and this child's offering. Bobby shifted nervously behind him. Boss, should we? Vincent raised his other hand slightly. Silence. His eyes never left the girl's face. Where's your mother? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Decades of cigarettes and hard conversations grinding against each other. 20 feet away, near the entrance to the Canal Street subway, a woman straightened up from where she'd been digging through her bag. She was a black woman in her early 30s, wearing nurse's scrubs under a thin coat that did nothing against the February cold. Her face carried the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than missed sleep, the bone-deep weariness of someone carrying weight that would have broken most people months ago. Her eyes found her daughter. Then they found Vincent. And in that instant, pure visceral terror transformed her features. She knew. She knew the scar, knew the expensive coat, knew the stone-faced men standing behind him like an honor guard of violence. She knew exactly who her daughter had just approached, Zara. The name came out as a strangled sound between a command and a prayer. Baby, come here right now. She rushed forward, her sneakers slapping against the wet pavement, nearly stumbling in her haste. I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. She's just a child. She didn't mean to bother you. Please, please forgive her. She doesn't understand. But Zara was still standing there, still holding out the hot chocolate and the $3, her small face serious and determined. Mommy says when people have stone faces, they forgot how to feel warm things, Zara said, pressing both the cup and the money into Vincent's gloved hands before her mother could pull her away. You gotta remember, mister, before the stone gets all the way through. Her mother grabbed her hand and pulled, bowing deeply, repeatedly, the universal gesture of someone who understood they'd crossed a line with someone dangerous and was desperately trying to minimize the consequences. I'm sorry. We're leaving. We won't bother you again, please. Vincent watched as the woman, he'd learn her name was Shanice later, practically carried her daughter toward the subway entrance, disappearing down the stairs into the underground, her apologies echoing back even after they'd vanished from sight. The street fell silent except for the wind and the distant sound of traffic on Canal. Vincent looked down at what he held, a cup of hot chocolate, still warm, and 3 crumpled dollar bills. A child's lunch money. A fortune to a 7-year-old. Offered to a stranger because he looked like he'd lost something important. His phone buzzed again. Insistent. The text he'd been waiting for. Bobby stepped closer, his voice low. "Boss, we got the confirmation. DeMarco's at his girlfriend's place in Williamsburg. Alone. Windows open for the next 20 minutes. You want us to move?" Vincent stared at the $3 in his palm. They felt heavier than they should. Heavier than the gun in his shoulder holster. Heavier than the phone buzzing in his pocket with an address that would start a war. "You look like you lost something important," the child had said. Vincent closed his fist around the money. The hot chocolate cup warmed his other hand through the glove. For the first time in 3 years, since Elena died, since the stone started growing over everything soft inside him, he felt something other than cold rage crack through. "Boss?" Bobby's voice carried an edge of urgency. "The window's closing. We need to move now, or stand down." Vincent's voice was quiet but absolute. "What?" "The hit's off. Tell the inside man to go dark. DeMarco lives tonight." Tommy 2 times stepped forward, confusion written across his face. "Boss, with all respect, your nephew. I know what happened to Anthony." Vincent turned to look at his men, and for just a moment, the stone face showed the exhaustion underneath. "But starting a war tonight won't bring him back. It'll just make more mothers bury their sons. Stand down. That's an order." The 3 men exchanged glances that Vincent pretended not to see. The silent conversation about whether their boss was losing his edge, whether grief had finally broken him, whether the Russo family's power was built on a foundation that was crumbling. Let them wonder. Vincent didn't have the energy to care about their doubts. Not right now. Not with $3 and a child's fearless compassion burning a hole through 20 years of carefully constructed armor. "And find out who that woman is," Vincent added, his eyes still on the subway entrance where they'd disappeared. "Where she works. Where she lives. Everything. But quietly. I don't want her scared any more than she already is." "Boss, why do you care about some random?" Vincent finally looked at Bobby directly, and whatever the man saw in his eyes made him stop mid-sentence and step back. "Because that little girl just handed me $3 and told me I looked like I lost something important," Vincent said quietly. "And she was right. I did. I lost it when they buried Elena. I lost it when I decided the stone face was safer than feeling anything. And I've been standing here for 2 hours ready to start a war, because I was too numb to remember there might be another way." He looked down at the hot chocolate cup, watching steam rise into the cold air. "Find out who they are. Find out what kind of trouble that woman's in. Because nobody that terrified of me is having a good day." Vincent's jaw tightened. "And if anyone in this city is making that little girl's life harder than it needs to be, I want to know about it." Marco nodded slowly. "I'll make some calls." "Discreet, good." Vincent started walking toward his car, then stopped and turned back. "And Marco? Thank you for not questioning this." His cousin smiled slightly, the first genuine expression any of them had shown all night. "Elena would have liked that kid. She always said the best people were the ones who saw sad strangers and wanted to help instead of running away." Vincent felt something twist in his chest. Not the ice he'd grown accustomed to, but something warmer and infinitely more painful. "Yeah. She would've." He got in the back of the Mercedes, still holding the hot chocolate and the $3. As his driver pulled away from the curb, Vincent looked out the window at the spot where Zara had stood, fearless and determined to help a man too dangerous for most adults to even look at directly. His phone buzzed a 3rd time, his inside man asking what the hell was going on, whether they were go or no-go, whether Vincent had gotten cold feet. Vincent typed back with one hand. "Target is off limits. Situation changed. Explain tomorrow. Go dark." Then he opened his other hand and looked at the 3 crumpled dollar bills. $3. The price of a child's snack. The cost of believing a sad stranger deserved comfort. The price of a man's life, and a war that would never happen. Vincent Russo didn't know it yet, but Zara Williams had just saved Jimmy the Hammer DeMarco from execution, prevented a conflict that would have killed dozens, and cracked open the stone face that Vincent had been hiding behind for 3 years. All because she looked at one of New York's most feared men, and saw, with the clarity that only existed in children, that he'd lost something important, and needed to remember the warm parts before the stone got all the way through. As the car moved through the cold February streets toward his empty penthouse in Tribeca, the one he hadn't been able to sleep in since Elena died there, Vincent brought the hot chocolate to his lips and took a sip. It was still warm, sweet with chocolate and hope and the kind of fearless compassion that saw monsters, and chose to offer kindness anyway. And for the first time in 3 years, Vincent Russo felt something other than ice in his chest. It hurt. God, it hurt worse than any bullet wound or knife fight or betrayal he'd survived in 20 years of this life. But it was warm, and maybe, just maybe, that 7-year-old girl was right about one thing. He needed to remember before the stone got all the way through. Because once it did, there would be nothing left worth saving. Chapter 1. Shanice's hands shook as she clocked into the visiting nurse dispatch system at 6:47 p.m., 3 hours after Zara had walked up to a mobster and handed him their grocery money. Her supervisor's voice crackled through the tablet. 6 patients tonight, all scattered across the Lower East Side in 4th-floor walk-ups with no elevators. Her feet already ached from the morning shift at Mount Sinai, but the second job wasn't optional. Not with the collectors calling twice a day. Not with $80,000 hanging over her head like a guillotine blade. She thought about Zara's face when she'd pulled her away from that man. Those serious eyes. That small voice saying, "Mommy, he was sad." I could see it. As if sadness justified approaching a man whose scar and stone face screamed danger, louder than any warning Shanice could give. Mrs. Chen on Eldridge Street needed her insulin checked and her bandages changed. Mr. Washington on Orchard needed help to the bathroom and someone to make sure he'd eaten something other than crackers. Miss Rodriguez needed her catheter flushed and her vitals recorded. Each apartment told the same story. People aging alone in 500-square-foot boxes, their families too busy or too far away, their bodies betraying them one system at a time. Shanice moved through the work with the muscle memory of someone who'd been doing this for 8 years. Gentle hands, encouraging words, fierce attention to the small details that meant the difference between comfort and suffering. This was what Marcus had loved about her, back when he was alive and the debt was just medical bills they'd figure out eventually. "You see people, Shan," he'd say. "Not just patients, you see the whole person." She saw them now as she climbed the 4th set of stairs, her thighs burning, her lower back screaming. Saw Mr. Washington's loneliness. Saw Mrs. Chen's fear that one day she'd fall and no one would find her for days. Saw Miss Rodriguez's dignity, the way she apologized for needing help with intimate things that bodies simply required. At 11:38 p.m., Shanice finally dragged herself up the 3 flights to her own apartment in Chinatown. Her mother had texted 2 hours ago, "Zara's asleep," drawing pictures of the sad man. "Baby, what happened today?" Shanice had texted back, "Tell you tomorrow. Thank you, Mama." She opened the apartment door as quietly as possible. Her mother dozed on the couch, reading glasses crooked on her face, Bible open in her lap. Shanice kissed her forehead, whispered thank you into the sleeping woman's hair, and helped her to the spare bedroom that used to be Marcus's home office before the cancer ate their savings and their future. Then Shanice moved to Zara's tiny room, barely bigger than a closet, but they'd painted it lavender together and hung glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Zara slept on her stomach, one hand clutching her stuffed elephant, papers scattered across her pillow. Shanice picked up the drawings carefully. Each one showed the same thing. A tall man with dark hair and a sad face, colored in grays and blacks. In one picture, Zara had drawn herself handing the man a cup with steam rising from it. In another, she'd written in careful letters, "Mr. Sadman, hot chocolate helps. Love, Zara." Tears burned Shanice's eyes. Her daughter had given a mobster $3 they desperately needed, because she thought he looked sad. Because Shanice had raised her to see people's pain and respond with kindness, just like Marcus had taught them both. But kindness didn't pay bills. Kindness didn't stop debt collectors from calling at 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. every single day. Kindness didn't make $80,000 disappear. Shanice adjusted Zara's blanket, kissed her forehead and whispered, "You got your daddy's heart, baby girl. I just hope this world doesn't punish you for it." She left the door cracked open. Zara didn't like complete darkness, and moved to the kitchenette that doubled as her own sleeping area. The fold-out couch waited, but she was too tired and too wired to sleep yet. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Shanice's stomach dropped. The collectors used spoofed numbers, called from different phones to get around her blocks. She answered because ignoring them just made it worse. "Hello? Shanice Williams?" A man's voice. Unfamiliar. Professional. "This is Anthony Castellano, with Metropolitan Debt Solutions. We need to discuss your outstanding balance of $83,247.19, which is now 63 days past due. We've been very patient, Ms. Williams, but our patience has limits." 63 days past due, because she'd had to choose between the payment and Zara's asthma medication. 63 days because 2 of her regular patients had died and the agency hadn't replaced their shifts yet. 63 days because surviving took priority over paying interest on a debt that had somehow grown from $52,000 to over $80,000 in 18 months, despite her paying nearly $400 every month. "I'm working on it," Shanice said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "I get paid Friday. I can send 200. 200 doesn't address the severity of your situation, Ms. Williams." Castellano's voice took on an edge. We're prepared to explore alternative collection methods. Garnishment. Asset seizure. We know you have a daughter. Don't. The word came out harder than she'd intended. Don't you dare mention my daughter. I'm simply noting that children have needs. Medical needs. Educational needs. It would be unfortunate if those needs became leverage in our collection efforts. A pause, letting the threat settle. We'll be in touch soon about new payment arrangements. Have a blessed evening, Ms. Williams. The line went dead. Shanice sat in her kitchenette that wasn't really a kitchen, in the apartment that was really just 3 small rooms stacked vertically, and felt the weight of $80,000 crushing her chest, until breathing became a conscious effort. Marcus's cancer had cost them everything. The experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover. The time she took off work to be with him during the final months. The funeral she'd charged because she couldn't let him go into the ground without dignity. And now men like Anthony Castellano called her at midnight to threaten her daughter because medical debt and grief and trying to survive as a black single mother in New York had somehow become crimes punishable by asset seizure and veiled threats. Shanice pulled out her own phone and looked at her bank balance. $247.18. Rent was due in 6 days. $1,850 for this shoebox in Chinatown, because anywhere cheaper meant schools she wouldn't send Zara to, and neighborhoods where walking home at midnight wasn't safe. She had 4 shifts this week at Mount Sinai, 6 visiting nurse appointments, and if she was lucky, she'd clear $200 after all the bills were paid. $200 toward $83,000. A drop of water against a wildfire. She thought about Zara's drawing of the sad man. About $3 offered to a stranger, because a 7-year-old believed hot chocolate could fix soul-deep pain. Shanice laughed once, a sound closer to a sob. "Oh baby," she whispered to the sleeping child in the next room. "If only the world worked like you think it does." Outside her building, 3 stories down in a black Mercedes sedan, Vincent Russo sat in the back seat with Bobby in the front, watching the surveillance feed on Bobby's tablet. They'd tracked her address through the nurse registry, pulled her route from the agency's poorly secured database, and followed her for the last 6 hours. Vincent had watched Shanice climb stairs that would have winded men half her age. Watched her spend 45 minutes with Mrs. Chen, making sure the woman's insulin was correct, her compression stockings were on properly, her dinner was warm, and her spirits were lifted. Watched her do the same exhausted, compassionate dance at 5 more apartments. And now he watched the light in her 3rd-floor window, a woman too tired to sleep, too worried to rest, checking on her daughter one more time before collapsing. "Boss," Bobby said quietly, "I ran her financials. The debts with Metro Debt Solutions. That's one of Castellano's front companies." Vincent's jaw tightened. Anthony Castellano. Small-time operator who ran predatory lending schemes, targeting the vulnerable. Usually immigrants, usually women, usually people who'd already been destroyed by medical bills or family emergencies. How much does she owe? Started at $52,000 from her husband's cancer treatment. But with their interest structure, 30% compounded weekly because they classify it as high-risk personal lending, it's up to $83,000 now. She's been paying $400 a month for 18 months. Barely touches the principal because of how they structure the interest. Vincent felt something cold and familiar settle over him. The calculation that came before violence. That's illegal. Loan sharking with paperwork. Yeah, but who's she gonna complain to? She's a black single mother, with a daughter to protect. She goes to the cops, Castellano makes her life hell. She defaults, he sends collectors, who don't just call at midnight. Bobby turned to look at Vincent. "Boss, why do we care about this?" Vincent stared at the window, where Shanice's light finally went out. He thought about Elena, who'd been a community health nurse before she got pregnant. Who'd worked double shifts even while carrying their baby because she believed healing people mattered more than exhaustion. Who'd died doing exactly what Shanice was doing now, giving everything to help others while her own body betrayed her. "Because that little girl handed me $3 tonight, and told me I looked like I'd lost something important," Vincent said quietly. "And her mother is drowning in debt that's killing her just as surely as the cancer killed her husband. And men like Castellano get rich off that kind of suffering. So what do you want to do?" Vincent watched the dark window for a long moment. Inside, Shanice Williams was probably lying awake despite her exhaustion, adding numbers that would never add up, wondering how she'd protect her daughter from men who saw vulnerability as opportunity. "Find out everything about Castellano's operation," Vincent said. "Every business, every front, every collector on his payroll, and find out where he'll be tomorrow. We're going to have a conversation about his collection practices." Bobby raised an eyebrow. "Boss, starting something with Castellano over a nurse and her kid, people are gonna talk. They're gonna say you're going soft. Let them talk." Vincent opened the car door, stepped out into the February cold. He looked up at the 3rd-floor window one more time, then back at Bobby. "That woman works 2 full-time jobs and still can't breathe, because vultures like Castellano designed a system to drown people. Her daughter saw me tonight, really saw me, and thought I was worth saving with $3 in hot chocolate. That kind of courage? That kind of compassion? That doesn't get punished on my watch. He started to walk away, then turned back. And Bobby? The little girl drew pictures tonight. Called me Mr. Sadman. Said hot chocolate helps. Vincent's stone face cracked just slightly. She's not wrong, so we're gonna make sure nobody ever threatens to take that kid from her mother. Clear? Bobby nodded slowly, something like respect in his eyes. Clear, boss. I'll have the full report by morning. Vincent walked to his own car, hands in his pockets, feeling the 3 crumpled dollar bills that he'd transferred from his glove to his coat. In his other pocket, his phone buzzed, probably his inside man wondering what the hell happened to the DeMarco hit, why everything got called off. But Vincent wasn't thinking about Jimmy DeMarco or mob wars or the whispers that he was losing his edge. He was thinking about a woman who climbed 4 flights of stairs at midnight, because elderly patients needed someone to see them as people. A woman who checked on her sleeping daughter with the same fierce tenderness Elena used to show. A woman drowning in debt designed to drown her while vultures got rich. And he was thinking about a 7-year-old girl who drew pictures of Mr. Sadman and believed that hot chocolate could save strangers from whatever darkness they carried. Maybe she was right, maybe it could. Or maybe Vincent Russo could be the hot chocolate. The unexpected warmth that broke through the cold system designed to crush people like Shanice Williams and her fearless daughter. Either way, Anthony Castellano was about to learn that some debts had consequences beyond money, and some 7-year-olds had protectors they didn't even know about yet. Chapter 2. The wash and fold on Hester Street was nearly empty at 8 p.m. on Thursday. Just Shanice folding scrubs at the back table while Zara sat cross-legged on a plastic chair, coloring in her workbook. 2 more hours until bedtime, and Shanice still had to finish the laundry, get Zara fed, and prep for tomorrow's early shift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, turning everything the sickly yellow-green of old bruises. Shanice was folding her last pair of scrub pants when the bell above the door chimed. 3 men walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She recognized the type immediately. The expensive tracksuits that tried to look casual but screamed money. The gold chains that caught the light. The way they moved with the lazy confidence of predators who'd never met real resistance. The leader was maybe 40, with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Shanice Williams, not a question. A confirmation. Zara looked up from her coloring book, her crayon freezing mid-stroke. Can I help you? Shanice's voice came out steadier than she felt. She positioned herself between the men and Zara, her body, a shield her daughter didn't yet understand she needed. Metro Debt Solutions, the leader said, pulling out a phone and scrolling. You missed your payment. Again. Mr. Castellano sent us to discuss payment arrangements. His eyes flicked to Zara, then back to Shanice. In person. I spoke to Mr. Castellano 2 days ago. I said I'd have $200 on Friday. Shanice's hands clenched the scrub pants. You didn't need to come here. 200? The man laughed, and his companions joined in like a trained chorus. Lady, you owe $83,000. 200 is insulting. It's disrespectful. He stepped closer. Mr. Castellano thinks maybe you need help understanding the seriousness of your situation. Mommy? Zara's small voice cut through the tension. It's okay, baby. Keep coloring. But Shanice's voice cracked on the words. The leader glanced at Zara again, and this time, his smile widened. Cute kid, 7, 8 years old? That's a good age. Old enough to understand value, young enough to be trainable. Ice flooded Shanice's veins. What did you just say? I said we need $5,000 tonight. Or we start exploring alternative collection methods. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. You signed a contract, Ms. Williams. Section 12, subsection C. In the event of persistent delinquency, the lender reserves the right to claim assets of equivalent value, including but not limited to property, vehicles, and, he paused for effect, dependents who can work off the debt through service arrangements. You're talking about my daughter. Shanice's voice was barely a whisper. I'm talking about collateral. You want to keep her home with you, coloring her little pictures? $5,000. Right now. Or the kid comes with us until you figure out how to be a responsible borrower. Shanice moved without thinking, putting herself fully between the men and Zara. You're not touching her. You hear me? You are not touching my child. The leader's smile disappeared. Lady, you don't have a choice. You signed. That contract is illegal and you know it. Shanice's voice rose, despite the terror clawing at her throat. You can't take a child for debt. That's kidnapping. That's trafficking. Big words from someone who can't afford a lawyer. He nodded to his companions. Get the kid. Let Mama think about her choices overnight. Maybe she'll find $5,000 under her mattress. One of the men moved toward Zara. Shanice grabbed his arm, and he shoved her hard into the folding table. She went down, scrub scattering, her hip connecting with the concrete floor hard enough to bring tears. "Mommy!" Zara screamed. The man reached for Zara, his hand closing on her small arm. The door chimed again. "Gentlemen." The voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. "I think you're in the wrong laundromat." Vincent Russo stood in the doorway, alone, his cashmere overcoat still perfectly pressed despite the winter wind outside. He looked exactly as he had 3 nights ago. The salt and pepper hair, the scar, the stone face that made grown men reconsider their life choices. The leader turned, irritation flashing across his features before recognition hit. His face went pale. "Mr. Russo, this is just a collection matter, routine business, nothing that concerns the woman you just knocked to the floor." Vincent stepped inside, his movements unhurried. "The 7-year-old child you just threatened to kidnap? Those concern me very much. We work for Mr. Castellano. He has an arrangement with this woman. Legal paperwork. We're just..." "Let go of the child." Vincent's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. Now, the man holding Zara's arm released her like she'd burned him. Zara ran to her mother, who'd pulled herself up from the floor, her hips screaming. "Mr. Russo, with all respect, this is Metro Debt Solutions business. Mr. Castellano won't appreciate interference." Vincent closed the distance between himself and the leader in 3 steps. "Mr. Castellano and I need to have a conversation about his business practices. But first, we're going to address yours." What happened next was surgical. Vincent's hand shot out, grabbed the leader's wrist with precision that came from decades of practice, and twisted. The sound of bone breaking was sharp and clean, like a branch snapping. The man screamed, dropped to his knees, cradling his arm. "That's for touching the woman," Vincent said calmly. Then he looked at the other 2 enforcers, who'd frozen in place. "Your friend just learned an important lesson about respect. Would you like the same education, or are you smart enough to walk out of here quietly?" The door opened again. Bobby and Tommy 2 times entered, their presence filling the small laundromat with the promise of overwhelming force. "Boss," Bobby's voice was casual, like they'd just run into each other at a coffee shop. "These gentlemen work for Anthony Castellano," Vincent said, never taking his eyes off the 2 standing enforcers. "They just tried to kidnap a 7-year-old girl to collect on a debt. Bobby, Tommy, please escort them back to Mr. Castellano with a message." "What message, boss?" "That Shanice Williams and her daughter are under my protection now. The debt is cancelled, and if anyone from Metro Debt Solutions comes within 100 yards of them again, I'll consider it a personal insult." Vincent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Make sure they understand what that means." Bobby and Tommy moved with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, all 3 enforcers were being herded toward the door, the leader still cradling his broken wrist, whimpering. "You're making a mistake," the leader gasped. "Mr. Castellano won't. Mr. Castellano will do exactly nothing, because he values his operation more than he values you." Vincent's voice hardened. "Now get out of my sight before I decide that a broken wrist isn't sufficient payment for threatening a child." They left. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully as Bobby and Tommy escorted them into the night. Silence fell over the laundromat. Just Vincent, Shanice, and Zara, who still clung to her mother like she could merge into her body for safety. Vincent turned to face them. Shanice had one arm wrapped around Zara, the other braced against the folding table, her entire body trembling. "You're hurt," Vincent said, noticing the way she favored her left side. "I'm fine." But her voice shook. How did you? "Your daughter gave me something 3 nights ago." Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 crumpled dollar bills. He walked to the folding table and set them down gently next to Shanice's scattered scrubs. She saw a stranger who looked sad and decided he needed hot chocolate more than she needed a snack. That kind of compassion is rare. It shouldn't be punished. Shanice stared at the money. Those are the same bills. You kept them. Your daughter bought a debt I can never repay, Vincent said quietly. She saved a life that night without knowing it. She stopped something terrible from happening. So I'm here to make sure her debt gets canceled. He paused. All of it. The $83,000. The illegal interest. The threats. All of it ends tonight. You can't just. Shanice's voice broke. That's not how this works. Castellano won't just let it go because you broke one guy's arm. He'll come back. He'll send more people. He'll make our lives. He won't. Vincent's stone face softened just slightly. Because I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Castellano. And by the time we're finished talking, he's going to understand that you and your daughter are off limits. Permanently. Zara peeked out from behind her mother's arm. Mr. Sadman? Vincent knelt down slowly, carefully, making himself less threatening. Hi Zara. Did the hot chocolate help? Her voice was small but serious. Vincent felt something crack in his chest. The same thing that had broken when she first handed him those $3. It helped more than you know. Thank you. Mommy says we can't take money from strangers. Your mother is right. But this isn't taking. This is returning. You gave me something I needed, and now I'm making sure nobody hurts you or your mom for being kind. He looked up at Shanice. I know you don't have any reason to trust me. I know what I am, and what that means. But I'm asking you to believe one thing. Your daughter saw something in me 3 nights ago that I'd forgotten existed. I'm not going to let the world punish her for that. Shanice's eyes filled with tears. I can't pay you back, if you're expecting. I'm not expecting anything. Vincent stood. Metro Debt Solutions is a front for predatory lending that targets vulnerable people. Your husband's cancer treatment cost you everything, and vultures like Castellano turned your grief into profit. That ends now. Why? The word burst out of Shanice like she couldn't hold it back anymore. Why do you care? We're nobody to you. You're not nobody. Vincent's voice carried a weight that made Shanice go quiet. You're a woman who works 2 jobs to keep her daughter safe. You're a nurse who climbs 4 flights of stairs at midnight because elderly patients need someone who sees them as people. You're a mother who would rather get knocked down than let strangers touch her child. He paused. You're exactly the kind of person men like Castellano prey on because they know you're too exhausted to fight back and too isolated to get help. Well, you're not isolated anymore. He pulled a card from his pocket. Simple white stock with just a phone number, no name. If anyone from Castellano's organization contacts you again, you call this number immediately. If anyone threatens you or your daughter, you call. If you need anything while I'm handling this situation, you call. Understood. Shanice took the card with shaking hands. I don't understand what's happening. What's happening is that 3 nights ago, your 7-year-old daughter gave a sad stranger $3 and reminded him that kindness still exists in this city. And now that stranger is making sure kindness doesn't get punished. Vincent moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Zara. Keep drawing your pictures. Keep seeing people's sad faces and wanting to help. The world needs more people like you. Zara smiled, small but genuine. Did you really keep my $3? Every single day since you gave them to me, Vincent said. They're the most valuable thing I own. He left then, the bell chiming behind him, leaving Shanice and Zara alone in the fluorescent-lit laundromat surrounded by scattered scrubs and the ghost of violence that had almost destroyed them. Shanice looked down at the $3 bills on the table. The same bills Zara had given to a stranger, because she thought hot chocolate could fix sadness. The same bills a mobster had carried for 3 days like they were sacred. Mommy? Zara's voice was small. Is Mr. Sadman an angel? Shanice pulled her daughter close, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling the solid weight of her body. Alive? Safe? Still here? I don't know what he is, baby, but he just saved us from something very bad. Outside, Vincent stood on the sidewalk as Bobby and Tommy returned from their delivery of Castellano's enforcers. The February wind had picked up, but Vincent barely felt it. Boss, Bobby said quietly, you know this means war with Castellano. He's not going to just accept you canceling an $80,000 debt and breaking his collector's arm. I know. Vincent looked back at the laundromat window, where he could see Shanice and Zara gathering their scattered laundry. Set up a meeting with Castellano. Tomorrow, tell him I want to discuss his collection practices. Make it very clear that refusing the meeting would be unwise. And if he refuses anyway? Vincent's stone face hardened. Then we move to plan B. But he won't refuse. Men like Castellano only respect force. Once he understands I'm willing to use it, he'll negotiate. Tommy shifted. Boss, people are already talking. First you call off the DeMarco hit, now you're starting something with Castellano, over a nurse and her kid. They're saying I'm going soft. I know. Vincent pulled his coat tighter against the wind. Let them say it. That little girl in there handed me $3 because she thought I looked like I'd lost something important. She was right. And if getting it back means people think I'm soft, that's a price I'm willing to pay. He walked to his car, leaving Bobby and Tommy to exchange glances that said their boss was changing in ways they didn't fully understand but were loyal enough not to question. Inside the car, Vincent looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The scar, the stone face, the exhaustion of 20 years spent being the monster everyone expected. But underneath it, for the first time in 3 years, he could feel something warm, something human, something that a 7-year-old girl had seen clearly enough to offer her lunch money as medicine. Tomorrow he'd deal with Castellano. Tomorrow he'd handle the consequences of choosing protection over profit, compassion over calculation. Tonight, he'd drive home knowing that Shanice and Zara Williams were safe. That a woman who worked herself to exhaustion helping others could sleep without fear of collectors breaking down her door. That a child who drew pictures of sad strangers and believed in the healing power of hot chocolate wouldn't learn that kindness got punished. Vincent started the engine, and as he pulled away from Hester Street, he realized something that would have terrified him a week ago. He didn't care if they thought he was going soft, because maybe soft wasn't weakness. Maybe Soft was just remembering the warm parts before the stone got all the way through. Chapter 3. The black Mercedes pulled up to a glass tower in Tribeca that looked like it cost more than Shanice would earn in 3 lifetimes. She sat in the back seat with Zara pressed against her side, her hands clutching the garbage bag containing everything they'd been able to grab from their apartment in the 20 minutes Vincent's men had given them. "This is a mistake," Shanice said for the 3rd time since leaving Hester Street. I can't just leave my home because you say it's not safe." Vincent, sitting in the front passenger seat, turned to look at her. "Castellanos enforcers know where you live. They know your daughter's school, your work schedule, the route you take home. Staying in that apartment means waiting for them to come back with more men and less patience." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing weather. "You can go back when this is handled. For now, you're safer here." "Safer in a mobster's penthouse?" Shanice's voice rose, despite her efforts to stay calm. Zara's hand tightened in hers. "You think I don't know how this works? Powerful men don't help people like me for free. There's always a price. Always something you'll want later that I can't afford to give." Something flickered across Vincent's stone face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "I understand why you'd think that. But the only thing I want is for you and Zara to be safe while I handle Castellano. That's all. No strings. Everyone says no strings." Shanice's laugh was bitter. "Then the strings show up later, wrapped around your throat." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "My wife was a nurse. Community health clinics in the Bronx. She worked herself to exhaustion because she believed helping people mattered more than anything else." He looked out the window. "She died 3 years ago. Complications during childbirth. We lost her and the baby both." His jaw tightened. "So when I see another nurse working herself to death while vultures get rich off her suffering, and her 7-year-old daughter is threatened by men who see children as collateral, no, Ms. Williams, there are no strings. Just a debt I can never repay to your daughter for reminding me I'm still human." Shanice felt her resistance crack slightly. "I'm sorry about your wife." "So am I." Vincent opened his door. "Come on. Let's get you settled." The penthouse occupied the entire top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, furniture that looked like it belonged in museums, a kitchen bigger than Shanice's entire apartment. Everything was immaculate, and utterly impersonal, like a hotel suite that nobody actually lived in. "I haven't been here since Elena died," Vincent said, as if reading her thoughts. "Been staying in a room above my club. Couldn't handle the space without her." He gestured toward a hallway. 3 bedrooms. Take whichever ones you want. Kitchen's fully stocked. Security system is active. No one gets in without the code." Zara, who'd been silent and wide-eyed since entering the building, finally spoke. "Can I explore?" Shanice started to say no, but Vincent nodded. "Go ahead. Just don't touch the office door at the end of the hall. That's locked. Everything else is fair game." Zara took off like she'd been released from a cage, her pink unicorn boots squeaking on the hardwood floors. Shanice watched her daughter disappear down the hallway, then turned to Vincent. "Why? And don't give me the line about your wife again. I believe you're sorry she died. I believe you see something of her in me. But that doesn't explain why you're risking whatever relationship you have with Castellano for people you don't know." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and handed it to her. "Read this." Shanice looked at the screen. It was an email, dated 4 months ago, from someone named K. Rodriguez, FBI. "Mr. Russo, confirming our arrangement. In exchange for your cooperation in documenting and testifying against the Castellano organization's predatory lending and human trafficking operations, the Bureau will provide full immunity for your past activities and witness protection for your family if needed. We need detailed records, names, locations, financial transactions, and recorded conversations. Time frame, 6 months minimum. Your handler will contact you separately with technical support for surveillance equipment." Shanice looked up, her heart pounding. "You're working with the FBI? For 6 months. I wear a wire to every meeting, document every transaction. I was already building a case against Castellano before I ever met you." Vincent took the phone back. "The man runs a human trafficking network, disguised as debt collection. He targets vulnerable people, mostly immigrant women, mostly with children, loads them with illegal debt, then collects their kids when they can't pay. Those children disappear into labor operations, domestic servitude, worse things I don't want to say in front of your daughter." Shanice felt sick. They were going to take Zara. Yes, and sell her to someone who needed a child for God knows what. Vincent's voice went cold. "I've been gathering evidence to bring down his entire operation, but it was abstract, numbers and recordings, and legal strategy. Then your daughter handed me $3, and Castellano's men threatened to kidnap her 48 hours later, and suddenly it wasn't abstract anymore." He met her eyes. "Now it's personal. Now I'm not just building a case. I'm making sure he never threatens another child again. So we're what? Bait? Witnesses?" Shanice backed up a step, You're using us to get to him. No. Vincent's response was immediate and sharp. You're not bait. You're not witnesses, unless you choose to be. You're two people who needed help, and I'm in a position to give it. Yes, taking down Castellano helps my case with the FBI. Yes, protecting you pisses him off and might make him sloppy. But that's not why I'm doing this. Then why? Because 3 nights ago, I was standing outside my club ready to start a war that would have killed a dozen people. And your daughter walked up to me with $3 and hot chocolate, because she thought I looked sad. She broke something open in me that's been frozen for 3 years. She reminded me that kindness exists, that people still see suffering and want to help instead of exploit it. Vincent's stone face cracked. Your daughter saved a man's life that night, the man I was about to have killed. She stopped a war. She did that with $3 and the kind of fearless compassion that this city usually beats out of people before they turn 8. And I'll be damned if I let Castellano punish her for it. Shanice stared at him, trying to reconcile the scarred face and the violence she'd witnessed in the laundromat, with the man standing in front of her now, talking about frozen hearts and fearless compassion. You're still a criminal, she said quietly. FBI deal or not, you've hurt people. Done things that… Yes. Vincent didn't flinch from it. I have, for 20 years, and most of those things I can never make right. The best I can do now is use the power I built through violence to protect people who can't protect themselves. That's not redemption. It's not enough, but it's what I have to offer. Zara came running back down the hallway, her face lit up. Mommy, there's a room with a huge bed, and it looks at the river, and there's a bathroom with a tub that has jets. She grabbed Shanice's hand. Can that be my room, please? Shanice looked down at her daughter's excited face, then back at Vincent. How long do we have to stay here? Until Castellano signs documents canceling your debt and agrees to leave you alone. 72 hours, maybe less if he's smart. Vincent pulled his coat on. I have a meeting with him tomorrow. Once we reach an agreement, you can go home. And if he doesn't agree, Vincent's expression went cold. Then plan B. But he'll agree. Men like Castellano understand leverage. Right now, I have all of it. He moved toward the elevator, then stopped. There's food in the kitchen. Security code is 0825, Elena's birthday. My number's on the fridge if you need anything. Bobby will be in the lobby overnight. You're safe here, Mr. Russo. Shanice's voice stopped him at the elevator. Thank you, for the laundromat. For this, I still don't completely trust it, but, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Vincent stepped into the elevator. We've got a long way to go before this is over. The elevator doors closed, leaving Shanice and Zara alone in the museum-like penthouse that belonged to a dead woman and a man who'd forgotten how to live in it. Mommy? Zara tugged her hand. Is Mr. Sadman a good guy or a bad guy? Shanice pulled her daughter close. I think he's trying to figure that out himself, baby. That night, after Zara had fallen asleep in the guest room with the river view, Shanice found herself unable to rest. She wandered the penthouse in borrowed pajamas from a drawer that still smelled faintly of expensive perfume. Elena's clothes, untouched for 3 years. Everything in this place was a shrine to a woman who'd died too young, loved by a man who'd turned to stone without her. She found the photographs around 2 a.m. They were tucked in a drawer in the living room. Dozens of them, like Vincent couldn't bear to display them, but couldn't throw them away either. Elena Russo had been beautiful. Dark, curly hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that reached all the way through the camera. In every picture, she looked alive in a way that made Shanice ache. She would have liked you. Shanice spun around. Vincent stood in the doorway, wearing the same clothes from earlier. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. I'm sorry, Shanice said quickly. I wasn't snooping. I just couldn't sleep and… It's fine. Vincent moved into the room slowly, like he was entering a space he'd been avoiding. I come here sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, look at the pictures, and remember what it felt like to be human. You loved her very much. More than I knew how to say when she was alive. Vincent picked up one of the photos, Elena in scrubs, laughing at something off camera. She saw the best in everyone. Believed people could change if they wanted to, badly enough. I thought she was naive, told her the world didn't work that way. But you're working with the FBI now, trying to take down Castellano. That's change. It's penance. Vincent set the photo down carefully. Elena died because I couldn't protect her from the one thing power can't control: biology, bad luck, the randomness of who lives and who dies. I've spent 3 years trying to figure out how to honor her memory. The FBI deal seemed like a start. And then Zara gave you $3. And then your daughter reminded me that Elena was right. People can change if they want to. The question is whether they want to badly enough. He looked at Shanice directly. You asked why I'm helping you. Part of it's the FBI case. Part of it's honoring Elena. But mostly, Your daughter looked at one of the most dangerous men in this city and saw someone worth saving with her lunch money. That kind of vision, that kind of faith in people. It's what Elena had. And I won't let this city destroy it in a 7-year-old just because her mother had the bad luck to marry a man who got cancer and the worst luck to fall into Castellanos' trap. Shanice felt tears burn her eyes. Marcus used to say the same thing. That I saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. That our daughter would grow up believing kindness mattered more than safety. She laughed bitterly. And look where it got us. 80,000 in debt, threatened by loan sharks, hiding in a mobster's penthouse. You're not hiding. You're surviving. There's a difference. Vincent moved toward the window, looked out at the city lights reflected in the dark river. Castellano built his empire on breaking people like you. People who believe in kindness, who work themselves to exhaustion helping others, who can't imagine anyone would target their children. He counts on you being too scared, too isolated, too exhausted to fight back. I am too exhausted to fight back. I know. That's why I'm fighting for you. Vincent turned back to face her. Tomorrow I meet with Castellano. I'm wearing a wire. FBI will be monitoring. I'm going to offer him a choice. Cancel your debt, sign documents leaving you alone permanently, and I don't destroy his operation immediately. Or refuse. And I make sure every piece of evidence I've gathered over 6 months lands on the right desks, by end of business. He'll never agree to that. It's too much for one debt, one woman. It's not about the debt anymore. It's about showing him that vulnerable people have protection now. That targeting single mothers and their children has consequences beyond legal fees and bribes. Vincent's voice hardened. It's about making sure your daughter can grow up believing kindness matters, because I'm going to prove that sometimes it does. Shanice wiped her eyes. You really think you can change things? Take down someone like Castellano, with the FBI's help? Yes. With 6 months of evidence and testimony? Absolutely. He paused. But it won't change everything. There will always be other Castellanos. Other predators. The best I can do is take down this one, and hope it scares the others into being more careful about who they target. That's not redemption. That's just arithmetic. I know. But it's the arithmetic that keeps your daughter safe. And right now, that's enough. Vincent moved toward the elevator. Get some sleep, Ms. Williams. Tomorrow's gonna be difficult, and I need you rested in case things go sideways. Vincent. His first name felt strange in her mouth. He stopped, turned back. My husband used to say that the world was made of 2 kinds of people. Those who saw suffering and looked away, and those who saw it and couldn't help but try to fix it. You're not as stone as you think you are. Vincent smiled slightly. The first real smile she'd seen from him. Your husband was a wise man. I'm sorry you lost him. Me too. Every single day. Shanice held up one of the photographs of Elena. But I think our people are still with us, teaching us how to be human even when the world makes it so damn hard. Yeah, Vincent said quietly, looking at his wife's frozen smile. Yeah, I think maybe they are. He left then, and Shanice sat alone with photographs of a dead woman who'd believed people could change, in a penthouse that had been a tomb for 3 years, until a 7-year-old girl cracked it open with $3, and the simple observation that sad strangers needed hot chocolate. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York glittered like a circuit board of possibilities. Millions of lives intersecting, some protected and some preyed upon, some safe and some drowning in debt designed to drown them. Tomorrow, Vincent Russo would walk into a room with Anthony Castellano wearing an FBI wire and carrying 6 months of evidence that could destroy a criminal empire. But tonight, in a penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, 2 women who'd lost the men they loved were learning that sometimes survival meant accepting help from unexpected places, that sometimes the monster turned out to be the protector, that sometimes $3 and fearless compassion could crack stone all the way through to whatever warmth still lived underneath. Shanice looked at Elena's photograph one more time, then carefully put all the pictures back in their drawer. Not hidden, just waiting. Like Vincent himself. Like all of them, waiting to see if change was possible or if stone went all the way through after all. In the guest room, Zara slept peacefully, dreaming of sad men and hot chocolate and river views. Safe for the moment in a fortress built by violence but opened by kindness. And somewhere in the city below, Anthony Castellano was about to learn that threatening the wrong 7-year-old could cost you everything you'd built on the suffering of others. The warm parts were winning, slowly, painfully, but winning. And that, Shanice realized as she finally headed to bed, was something worth protecting with every resource Vincent Russo could bring to bear, including the pieces of himself he'd thought were frozen beyond recovery. Chapter 4. Shanice woke to the sound of her daughter's laughter. A sound so rare these past 18 months that it pulled her from sleep like an alarm. She found her phone on the nightstand, 7:23 a.m. She'd slept almost 6 hours straight for the first time since Marcus died. She pulled on the borrowed robe and followed Zara's voice to the kitchen. where an impossible scene was unfolding. Zara stood on a step stool at the marble counter, her hair still in the bonnet Shanice had put on last night, wearing her purple pajamas with the unicorns. Bobby the barber Scarpino, 6 feet of muscle and scar tissue who'd helped drag 3 men out of a laundromat 2 nights ago, sat on a bar stool watching with intense concentration as Zara demonstrated something with a whisk and a saucepan. No, Zara was saying, her 7-year-old authority absolute. You can't just dump all the chocolate in at once. It gets lumpy. You gotta do it slow, like this. She demonstrated, stirring carefully. And the marshmallows. That's the most important part. Too many, and it's too sweet. Not enough, and it's just chocolate milk. You need exactly 4 regular ones, or 7 minis. That's the science. Bobby nodded solemnly, like she was teaching him to defuse a bomb. 4 regular or 7 minis. Got it. And you gotta warm the milk first, but not boiling. Grandma says boiling kills the magic. Zara stirred with the focus of a surgeon. There, now you try. She handed Bobby the whisk. His massive hand looked ridiculous holding the delicate kitchen tool, but he took it seriously, stirring exactly as she'd shown him. Good! Zara clapped. You're a natural hot chocolate maker, Mr. Bobby. Thanks, kid. Bobby's stone face cracked into something, almost like a smile. My nana used to make me hot chocolate when I was little. Haven't thought about that in 30 years. See? Hot chocolate is magic. It makes people remember good things. Zara turned and saw Shanice in the doorway. Mommy, Mr. Bobby didn't know how to make hot chocolate the right way. Can you believe it? Shanice couldn't quite process the scene. Baby, Mr. Bobby probably has important things to do. You shouldn't. Boss said to keep the kid entertained while you slept, Bobby said, carefully pouring hot chocolate into 2 mugs. This is the most interesting assignment I've had in years. He handed 1 mug to Zara. How'd I do? Zara took a sip, her face serious with evaluation. 93%. You forgot to do the figure 8 stir at the end. That's what makes it extra smooth. But this is really good for a first try. I'll practice. Bobby stood, nodded to Shanice. Boss is in the office with his lawyer. Said to tell you he'll be out in 10 minutes. There's breakfast stuff in the fridge if you're hungry. He left then, taking his own mug of hot chocolate, and Shanice heard him mutter, figure 8 stir to himself as he headed toward the elevator. Baby, Shanice said carefully. You need to be careful around Mr. Bobby and the other men here. They're not. They're Mr. Sadman's friends, Zara said simply. And Mr. Sadman is nice, so his friends are probably nice too. Mr. Bobby has sad eyes though. I think he needs more hot chocolate practice. Before Shanice could figure out how to explain that mobsters couldn't be categorized as nice just because they had sad eyes, Vincent emerged from the office, carrying a manila folder and a laptop. He looked like he'd been up all night, same clothes from yesterday, shadow of beard, exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. Morning, he said. Sorry to wake you early, but we need to talk before my meeting with Castellano. He set the folder and laptop on the kitchen table. Zara, Bobby said you're a good teacher. I am. Zara beamed. He got 93% on his first try. That's an A-. That's excellent. Vincent pulled out a chair, gestured for Shanice to sit. I need to show your mother something. Do you want to watch cartoons in the living room? There's a TV and everything. Zara looked at her mother for permission. Shanice nodded, and Zara took her hot chocolate to the massive sectional couch, where she discovered the remote had approximately 4,000 buttons and began experimenting with delight. Shanice sat across from Vincent, her stomach tight with anxiety. What is it? Vincent opened the folder. I had my lawyer and a forensic accountant work through the night, reviewing your debt documentation. He pulled out papers covered in highlighted sections, sticky notes, and handwritten calculations. Your husband Marcus Williams was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 18 months ago. Treatment at Mount Sinai. He died 4 months after diagnosis. Yes. Shanice's throat closed. She'd lived this nightmare. She didn't need to hear it again. The hospital billed $87,000 for his treatment. Your insurance covered $35,000. That left a balance of $52,000. Vincent pulled out a spreadsheet. Within 2 weeks of Marcus's death, Metro Debt Solutions, Castellanos company, purchased your debt from the hospital for pennies on the dollar. Standard practice. Legal so far. I know all this, but here's what you don't know. Vincent turned the laptop to face her. The hospital inflated the charges. A standard chemotherapy session cost $3,000 to $5,000. They charged you $12,000 per session. The end-of-life care that lasted 4 days. They billed it as 2 weeks of intensive ICU. The medications they charged $8,000 for. Actual cost was $1,200. Shanice stared at the numbers. They can do that? They can if the patient's family is too grief-stricken and overwhelmed to fight it, which is exactly what they counted on. Vincent pulled out more documents. My accountant estimates the legitimate debt should have been around $28,000, not $52,000. But it gets worse. He showed her Metro Debt Solutions contract, the one she'd signed in a haze of grief and desperation 6 weeks after Marcus died. The document was dense with legal language, but Vincent had highlighted specific sections in angry red. They classify this as a high-risk personal loan instead of medical debt. That lets them charge 30% interest compounded weekly instead of the legal maximum for medical debt, which is 8% annually. You've been paying $400 a month for 18 months, that's $7,200. But because of how they structure the interest, only $180 of each payment goes to principal. The rest is interest and, quote, administrative fees. Shanice felt sick. I've paid over $7,000 and barely touched what I owe? You've actually overpaid by about $30,000. Vincent's voice was tight with controlled anger. If the debt had been legitimate and legally structured, your payments would have cleared it months ago. But Castellano designed this system specifically to trap people. The debt never goes down. It only grows. And then when you can't pay anymore, they threaten to take your children. Shanice's hands were shaking. As collateral. Exactly. He targets recently widowed immigrant women because they're vulnerable. Drowning in grief, often working multiple jobs, isolated from family support systems, afraid to go to authorities because of immigration concerns, or just general distrust of the system. Vincent closed the laptop. You're not the first person he's done this to. My FBI handler says they've identified at least 47 women in the same situation across New York and New Jersey. 12 children have disappeared into his collection system in the past 3 years. Shanice pressed her hands to her mouth. Oh my God. Most of those children end up in domestic servitude or agricultural labor. Some worse places we're still trying to track. Vincent's stone face was rigid with fury. Castellano has built a human trafficking network, disguised as legitimate debt collection. And he gets away with it because his victims are too scared and too exhausted to fight back. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're up against, and what you've already survived. Vincent pulled out one more document, this one with an FBI seal. This is a legal opinion from the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. Your debt is void. The contract is illegal. You don't owe Metro Debt Solutions anything. In fact, they owe you approximately $7,200 in restitution for payments you shouldn't have made. Shanice stared at the document. 18 months of drowning, 18 months of working. Double shifts and barely sleeping and rationing food and living in terror every time the phone rang. 18 months of believing she'd failed Marcus by not being able to pay for his death. And it was all a lie. A predatory trap designed to destroy her. I don't owe anything? Her voice was barely a whisper. Nothing. The debt never existed in any legal sense. What existed was a criminal enterprise, exploiting your grief. Vincent's voice softened slightly. I'm going to Castellano this afternoon with this evidence. I'm going to give him a choice. Sign documents canceling your debt and leaving you alone permanently. Or I hand everything I've gathered over 6 months to the FBI and they arrest him by end of business. He'll never agree to that. It's not just my debt. It's his entire business model. You're asking him to admit everything he's built is illegal. I'm asking him to cut his losses on one case, to avoid losing everything. Vincent leaned forward. The FBI already has enough to arrest him. What they don't have is enough to guarantee convictions on the trafficking charges. Those are harder to prove because the victims are terrified to testify. I'm offering Castellano a deal. Cooperate on your case. Make it very public that he's restructuring his business practices. And maybe, the FBI focuses on the financial crimes instead of pushing for the trafficking charges that carry 30 years minimum. You're using me as leverage. I'm using your case as the tip of a spear that's been 6 months in the making. Vincent didn't look away. Yes, protecting you serves my FBI cooperation deal. Yes, making Castellano back down publicly helps build a broader case. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because your daughter gave me $3 and reminded me what it feels like to be human instead of stone. And because you're drowning in fake debt designed to destroy you. And I have the power to make it stop. Shanice looked at the evidence spread across the table. The inflated hospital bills, the predatory contract, the FBI legal opinion. 18 months of her life, quantified, and explained and revealed as a systematic trap. Once you make this move, she said slowly, we're linked to you. Your enemies become our enemies. Castellano might agree to leave us alone, but what about everyone else in your world? What about the people who think you're going soft because you're protecting a nurse and her kid? Yes, Vincent's acknowledgement was immediate. That's the risk. That's what you need to understand before I walk into that meeting. Once I do this, you're under my protection. That means safety from Castellano. But it also means association with me and everything I represent. People will know you're connected to me. Some will respect that. Others will see it as weakness or opportunity. And if something happens to you, if you get arrested or killed, or decide this is too much trouble, I've set up a trust fund in Zara's name. $2 million, managed by an independent trustee, accessible when she turns 18 or earlier for education and medical expenses. Vincent pulled out another document. If anything happens to me, you're still protected. The trust can't be touched by anyone. Not the FBI. Not my organization. Not Castellano. It's clean money, legitimately sourced through the real estate holdings I've been building for years. Shanice felt tears burn her eyes. You set up a trust fund for my daughter, a child you met 4 days ago. A child who saw a stranger with a stone face and thought he deserved hot chocolate. That kind of compassion is rare, Ms. Williams. It should be protected. Vincent's voice carried a weight that made Shanice's chest ache. My wife and I never got to have children. The baby died with her. I'll never be a father. But I can make sure your daughter grows up knowing that sometimes kindness is rewarded, instead of punished. That's worth $2 million. It's worth more than that. From the living room came Zara's delighted laughter as she found a cartoon she liked. The sound floated through the penthouse like light through stained glass, pure and uncomplicated, and utterly unaware of the adult negotiations happening in the kitchen. If I say yes to this, Shanice said carefully, if I let you go into that meeting and face down Castellano, what do you need from me? Complete trust. If something goes wrong, if this gets messy, you follow Bobby's instructions without question. You don't try to go back to your apartment. You don't try to handle this yourself. You trust that I know how to navigate this world, and you let me do it. Vincent's stone face showed a crack of vulnerability. I know that's asking a lot. I know you have every reason not to trust a man like me. But if this is going to work, I need you to believe that I'm fighting for you, not using you. Shanice looked at the evidence spread across the table. She thought about 18 months of drowning. She thought about collectors threatening to take Zara. She thought about Marcus's last words to her in the hospital. Take care of our girl. Don't let this world make her hard. Okay, she said finally. I trust you. Not because I think mobsters are trustworthy, but because my 7-year-old daughter looked at you and saw something worth saving. And her judgment has always been better than mine. Vincent smiled. Small but genuine. Your daughter has excellent judgment. She gave me hot chocolate instead of running away. She does tend to help sad strangers, instead of having proper self-preservation instincts. The world needs more people with terrible self-preservation instincts and fearless compassion. Vincent stood, gathering the documents. I'm meeting Castellano at 2 p.m. Bobby will stay here with you. If something goes wrong, he'll know before I do. I'm wearing a wire, and the FBI is monitoring. But I don't think it'll go wrong. Castellano is a businessman. When presented with the choice between losing one case and losing everything, he'll take the deal. And if he doesn't, Vincent's stone face went cold. Then plan B, which involves a lot more FBI agents and significantly less negotiation. He moved toward the office, then stopped. Ms. Williams, Shanice, thank you for trusting me. I know what it cost to you. I won't waste it. After he left, Shanice sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of 18 months of predatory exploitation. She felt something rising in her chest that she hadn't felt since Marcus died. Not hope exactly, but something closer to possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was ending. Zara appeared in the doorway, her hot chocolate mug empty. Mommy, are you crying? Happy tears, baby. Shanice pulled her daughter into her lap. Mr. Sadman just showed me that the bad debt we've been worried about, the one that's been making us scared, it's not real. He's going to make it go away, see? Zara said with the certainty of a child who'd never doubted the outcome. I told you hot chocolate helps. You just gotta give it to the right person at the right time. Shanice held her daughter close, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling the solid weight of her body. Alive, safe, protected by a mobster who'd been cracked open by $3 and fearless compassion. You were right, baby. Hot chocolate is magic. I know, Zara said simply. Grandma told me. And grandmas are never wrong about important things. In the office, Vincent stood alone with his phone pressed to his ear, listening to FBI Special Agent Karen Rodriguez confirm the surveillance team was ready for the afternoon meeting. We'll have eyes and ears on everything, Rodriguez said. The wire is working perfectly. If Castellano makes any threats or indicates violence, we can have a tactical team there in under 2 minutes. He won't be violent. Not in a first meeting. He'll posture and threaten, but he's too smart to give you assault charges on tape. Vincent looked at the folder containing Shanice's case. He'll take the deal once he understands I'm serious. And if he doesn't, then you get to arrest him this afternoon instead of waiting another month for the trafficking case to come together. Either way, he's done hurting people like Shanice Williams. Vincent hung up and looked at the photograph he kept in his desk drawer. Elena on their wedding day. Her smile bright enough to light the world. He thought about what she'd say if she could see him now. Protecting a widow and her child. Working with the FBI. Choosing to crack the stone face wide open instead of letting it consume him completely. She'd be proud, he thought. Or at least she'd understand why he had to try. I'm doing this for you too, he told the photograph quietly. Trying to be the man you believed I could be, even if it's 20 years too late. The photograph didn't answer, but Vincent felt warmth anyway. The same warmth that had broken through when a 7-year-old handed him $3 and told him he'd lost something important. He was finding it again, slowly, painfully, one choice at a time. And this afternoon, he'd make sure Anthony Castellano learned that threatening 7-year-olds who believed in the magic of hot chocolate carried consequences that even predators couldn't escape. The warm parts were winning, and Vincent Russo was finally letting them. Chapter 5. The back room of Russo's restaurant in Astoria had hosted 1,000 deals over the years. Territory negotiations, profit splits, the kind of conversations where men spoke in percentages and bodies dropped when the math didn't add up. Vincent had chosen it deliberately. Neutral enough that Castellano wouldn't feel ambushed, familiar enough that Vincent controlled the environment. He arrived 20 minutes early, watching through Bobby's surveillance feed as Castellano pulled up in a black Escalade with 2 enforcers. But it was the Silver Crown Victoria that parked 3 spots down that made Vincent's jaw tighten. Government plates poorly disguised with a dealer frame. Federal Agent Marcus Webb, Bobby said quietly, watching from his position by the door, assigned to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. On paper, he investigates money laundering and racketeering. In reality, he's on Castellano's payroll. Vincent adjusted the wire under his shirt, so small it was invisible, so sensitive it would catch every word spoken in this room. Good, makes this easier. Castellano entered first, mid-50s, expensive suit that couldn't hide the predator underneath, smile that had probably closed 1,000 deals right before he destroyed the people who trusted it. The federal agent followed, younger than Vincent expected, with the kind of clean-cut appearance that made people trust badges and authority. Vinny. Castellano's voice carried false warmth. Been a while since we sat down face to face. Heard you wanted to discuss business. Business practices, specifically. Vincent gestured to the chairs around the table. Sit. This won't take long. Castellano's eyes narrowed slightly, but he sat. Agent Webb positioned himself near the door, not blocking it, but close enough to make a point about authority. Before we start, Webb said, his voice carrying bureaucratic precision, I want to make clear that any agreements reached here need to comply with federal oversight. Mr. Castellano's operations are currently under review, and any cut the performance, Vincent said flatly. We all know you're here because Castellano pays you $300,000 a year to make federal oversight disappear. Bobby, show them. Bobby set a tablet on the table, the screen displaying bank transfers, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, regular deposits from shell companies tied to Metro Debt Solutions, withdrawals that coincided perfectly with closed investigations and misplaced evidence. Webb's face went pale. Where did you... That's classified financial. It's evidence of corruption. And before you threaten me with obstruction charges, know that I've been wearing an FBI wire for 6 months. Vincent tapped his chest. Special Agent Karen Rodriguez is listening to every word right now, along with her entire team. So I'd be very careful about what you say next. The room went silent, except for the hum of the restaurant's ventilation system. Castellano's false smile disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation of a man reassessing his position. You're cooperating with the feds, Castellano said slowly. How long? Long enough to document your entire operation. The predatory lending. The human trafficking disguised as debt collection. The 47 women you've targeted across New York and New Jersey. The 12 children who disappeared into your collection system. Vincent pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Long enough to bury you for 30 years minimum. Castellano's hands clenched. So this is a shakedown. You want to cut? Want to renegotiate territory? What's your angle, Vinny? My angle is simple. Vincent opened the folder, pulled out documents. Shanice Williams, widow, visiting nurse, mother of a 7-year-old daughter named Zara. You purchased her medical debt from Mount Sinai 18 months ago for pennies on the dollar. Then you inflated it, added illegal interest, and turned $28,000 of legitimate debt into $83,000 of predatory exploitation. That's business. Legal business with proper contracts. It's loan sharking with paperwork. And 2 nights ago, your enforcers threatened to kidnap her daughter as, quote, collateral, when she couldn't pay. Vincent's voice went cold. That crosses a line. Castellano leaned back, studying Vincent with new interest. This is about one debt? One woman? You're burning 6 months of FBI cooperation over a nurse and her kid? I'm burning 6 months of FBI cooperation because your business model is predatory garbage that destroys vulnerable people. Shanice Williams is just the case that made it personal. Webb found his voice, though it shook slightly. Mr. Russo, interfering with legitimate debt collection is? Agent Webb. Vincent turned to face him directly. Right now, Agent Rodriguez is uploading your financial records to the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility. In approximately, he checked his watch, 15 minutes, your supervisors will receive notification of an internal investigation into corruption charges. You have two choices. Sit quietly while we conclude this meeting, or open your mouth again, and I'll make sure those charges include obstruction and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Webb's mouth closed. He looked at Castellano, but found no help there. Here's the deal, Vincent said, pushing documents across the table. You sign these papers canceling Shanice Williams' debt. You sign a legally binding agreement that Metro Debt Solutions will never contact her or her daughter again. You restructure your business practices to comply with actual lending laws. No more 30% weekly interest. No more threatening to take people's children. And in exchange? Castellano's voice was tight. In exchange, the FBI focuses their case on financial crimes, money laundering, racketeering, tax evasion. White-collar charges that carry 5 to 10 years instead of 30. You might even get probation if you cooperate and pay restitution to your victims. Or I don't sign, and what? They arrest me today? They arrest you, Agent Webb, and 17 of your associates by close of business. The trafficking charges get priority. You're looking at 30 years minimum. No parole. Federal supermax. Vincent leaned forward. All because you threatened to kidnap a 7-year-old girl who gave me $3 in hot chocolate. Castellano stared at him like he was seeing Vincent for the first time. You're serious. You're actually willing to burn your FBI deal, expose yourself as a cooperating witness, make yourself a target for every ambitious soldier in this city, all over some kid who handed you lunch money. Yes. Why? What is she to you? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. 4 days ago, I was standing outside my club ready to start a war. Ready to kill a man in retaliation for my nephew's murder. And this 7-year-old girl walked up to me with $3 and told me I looked like I'd lost something important. She broke my focus. She saved that man's life. She reminded me that kindness still exists in this city. He met Castellano's eyes. And then 48 hours later, your men tried to kidnap her because her mother couldn't pay fake debt on a dead husband's cancer bills. That kind of predatory evil, that ends. Today, Castellano picked up the documents, skimmed them. You're asking me to dismantle my entire business model. I'm asking you to stop trafficking children. The rest of your operation is between you and the FBI. Vincent's voice hardened. But Shanice Williams and her daughter are off limits. Permanently. Non-negotiable. The silence stretched. Webb looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't dare. Castellano's fingers drummed on the table, the only sign of agitation in his otherwise controlled demeanor. You've gone soft, Vinny, Castellano said finally. Trading your empire, your reputation, your safety, all for a nurse and a kid who gave you hot chocolate. Elena's death broke something in you, made you weak. And weakness is fatal in our world. Maybe. Or maybe I finally figured out that spending 20 years being strong in all the wrong ways just made me stone instead of human. Vincent pulled out a pen, set it on the documents. Sign. Or don't. But decide now, because Agent Rodriguez is waiting for my signal. Castellano looked at the pen, at the documents, at Vincent's stone face that somehow didn't look quite as stone as it had 4 days ago. If I sign this, I'm admitting my operation was illegal. You're admitting one case was mishandled. The rest is still under investigation. But you're also staying out of prison for 30 years. Vincent's voice softened slightly. I know what you are, Anthony. I know because I've been exactly the same thing for 20 years. A man who saw vulnerable people and saw opportunity instead of humanity. But that kid looked at me and saw something worth saving. And I'll be damned if I let you punish her for it. Castellano picked up the pen. For a moment, Vincent thought he might throw it across the room, might refuse out of pride or principle or just because giving in to demands felt like defeat. Then he signed 3 documents, his signature harsh and angry but legally binding. There, Castellano said, shoving the papers across the table. Shanice Williams' debt is cancelled. Metro Debt Solutions will never contact her again. Happy? Not yet. Vincent pulled out his phone, took photos of each signed document, sent them to Agent Rodriguez. Now I'm happy. Castellano stood, his face tight with barely contained rage. You made a mistake today, Vinny. You showed the whole city that Vincent Russo trades empires for lunch money and children's tears. You think your people will respect that? You think they'll follow a boss who goes soft over a nurse and her kid? I think my people will follow a boss who keeps his word and protects the innocent. And the ones who don't. Vincent stood as well. They can leave. I'm done building power on other people's suffering. You're a dead man walking. Give it 6 months. Some ambitious soldier will decide you're too weak to lead, and they'll put a bullet in your head. And I'll read about it in the paper and think, that's what happens when kindness makes you stupid. Castellano moved toward the door, then turned back. But for what it's worth, that little girl of hers is lucky. Most kids in this city don't get mobsters willing to die for them. He left. Webb scurried after him, his career in ruins, his corruption about to become a federal case study. Bobby approached the table, picked up the signed documents. Boss, you know he's right. People are gonna say you've lost your edge. They're gonna see this as weakness. Let them. Vincent pulled the wire from under his shirt, set it on the table. The small device had recorded everything. Castellano's admission, Webb's silence, the whole negotiation that just canceled $83,000 in predatory debt with 3 signatures. Rodriguez got what she needed. Bobby checked his phone. Text came through 30 seconds ago. She says the recordings are perfect. They're moving on Webb immediately. Arrest warrant in process. Castellano gets 48 hours to hire a lawyer before they bring him in on the financial crimes. Good. Vincent looked at the empty room, the table where he'd just traded whatever reputation he had left for a widow and her daughter. Take those documents to Shanice. Tell her it's over. She doesn't owe anything. She's free. Boss. Bobby hesitated. What Castellano said about being a dead man walking. He's not wrong. You just showed vulnerability. In our world, that's blood in the water. I know. Vincent moved toward the door. But that 7-year-old girl is alive and safe because I did it. And for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm honoring Elena's memory, instead of building monuments to grief. So if some ambitious soldier decides I'm weak, and tries to take me out, at least I'll die human instead of stone. He left the restaurant, and walked 3 blocks to Café Palermo, his social club, his territory. The place where 4 days ago he'd stood in February rain, waiting to authorize a murder. The club was empty this time of day, just Marco cleaning glasses behind the bar. Boss, Marco said surprised. Didn't expect you. How'd the meeting go? Better than expected. Vincent pulled the 3 crumpled dollar bills from his pocket, the ones Zara had given him, the ones he'd carried every day since. I need a display case. Small, lockable, good quality. And I need it now. Marco disappeared into the back office, returned with a mahogany and glass case about 8 inches square, the kind designed for displaying expensive watches or jewelry. This work? Perfect. Vincent arranged the $3 bills carefully inside, smoothing them flat. Then he pulled the empty hot chocolate cup from his car. He'd kept it in the passenger seat, unable to throw it away. He placed it next to the bills. $3, and an empty paper cup. The most valuable things Vincent Russo owned. He locked the case, set it on the shelf behind the bar where everyone who entered the club would see it. Where his soldiers, and associates, and enemies, would all have to look at the evidence that their boss had been cracked open by a child's compassion. Boss, Marco said carefully, what is that? That's the reason I'm still human. The reason I canceled $83,000 in debt today. The reason I'm working with the FBI to take down Castellano. Vincent stared at the display case. 4 days ago, a 7-year-old girl gave me $3 in hot chocolate because she thought I looked like I'd lost something important. She was right. I had. And this, he gestured to the case. This is me remembering what it was. Marco was quiet for a long moment. You really did go soft. Yeah, Vincent said. I really did. And it's the best decision I've made in 20 years. He left Marco staring at the display case and walked out into the February afternoon, warmer now than it had been 4 days ago, like the city itself was thawing. His phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez Webb in custody. Castellano's lawyer just called requesting a meeting. Documents are solid. William's debt is legally void. Well done. Vincent didn't feel like he'd done well. He felt like he'd barely done the minimum, protected one family from one predator, while hundreds of others still suffered. But it was a start, a crack in the stone that might, with time and effort, become an opening wide enough to let warmth through. At the Tribeca penthouse, Shanice was folding laundry when Bobby arrived with the documents. She read them 3 times, her hands shaking, unable to believe what she was seeing. Debt canceled, legally binding agreement, signatures and notarization making it real. It's over. Her voice was barely a whisper. It's over, Bobby confirmed. Boss said to tell you you're free, you don't owe anything, and Castellano will never contact you again. He signed papers promising it. Shanice sank into a chair, the documents clutched to her chest. 18 months of drowning. 18 months of terror and exhaustion, and believing she'd failed Marcus by not being able to pay for his death. And it ended with 3 signatures from a mobster who'd been cracked open by her daughter's $3. Zara appeared in the doorway. Mommy, why are you crying? Happy tears, baby. Shanice pulled her daughter close. Remember the bad debt I told you about? The one that's been making us scared. Mr. Sadman made it go away. All of it. We're free. Zara smiled. bright and uncomplicated and full of the kind of certainty that only existed in children who believed hot chocolate could fix anything. See? I told you. You just gotta give it to the right person at the right time. You were right, baby. You were so right. Bobby cleared his throat. Boss also said to tell you. You can stay here as long as you need. Or if you want to go home, he'll have the apartment secured and make sure nobody bothers you. Your choice. Shanice looked around the penthouse that had been a tomb for 3 years, until a 7-year-old's compassion cracked it open. We should go home. Back to our neighborhood, our life. But, she hesitated. Tell Mr. Russo thank you. For everything. For seeing Zara's kindness, and choosing to protect it, instead of exploit it. Tell him. She stopped, unable to find words big enough for what she wanted to say. Tell him his wife would be proud, she finally managed. Tell him the warm parts won. Bobby nodded, something suspiciously like emotion in his stone face. I'll tell him, ma'am. And for what it's worth, the boss is different now. Better. Your kid did that with $3 in hot chocolate. That's some kind of magic. After he left, Shanice held Zara close, and looked out at the city. The same city that had tried to drown them, that had taken Marcus and left them with fake dead and predators who saw grief as opportunity. But it was also the city where a 7-year-old girl could hand $3 to a stranger and save lives, prevent wars, and crack stone faces wide enough to let warmth through. Grandma says magic is real if you believe in it, Zara said quietly. Yeah, baby, Shanice whispered. I think maybe she's right. At Cafe Palermo, Vincent stood in front of the display case containing $3 and an empty hot chocolate cup. The most valuable things he owned. The evidence that kindness could crack stone, that 7-year-olds could save lives, that it was never too late to remember the warm parts before they disappeared completely. Castellano was right about one thing. Vincent had gone soft. Had traded empire and reputation and safety for a widow and her daughter. But looking at those 3 crumpled dollar bills, remembering Zara's serious face as she told him he'd lost something important, Vincent realized he'd made the trade glad. Chapter 6. The whispers started before Vincent even left Queens. By the time he returned to Cafe Palermo, 3 of his captains were waiting. Sal Martino, Frank the Fixer DeLuca, and his own cousin Marco. They stood near the bar like judges at a tribunal, their stone faces reflecting the same calculation Vincent had perfected over 20 years. We need to talk, Sal said without preamble. About what happened with Castellano. Vincent poured himself whiskey, noting that none of them had touched the bottle. This wasn't a social visit. I'm listening. You canceled $83,000 in debt, Frank said, his voice careful. You forced Castellano to sign documents leaving a civilian alone. You exposed yourself as an FBI cooperator, all for a nurse and her kid. That's accurate. Boss, Marco leaned forward. People are talking. They're saying you've gone soft since Elena died. That grief made you weak. That you're making decisions with your heart instead of your head. They're not wrong. Vincent took a sip of whiskey, let the burn ground him. I have gone soft. I did make a decision with my heart. And yes, grief changed me, but not the way they think. Sal exchanged glances with Frank. Boss, with respect, in our world, showing weakness gets you killed. You just showed the entire city that Vincent Russo trades empire for lunch money. How long before some ambitious soldier decides you're too weak to lead? Is that a threat, Sal? It's a warning. Sal's voice carried genuine concern. I've been with you 15 years. I watched you build this organization from nothing. I know what it cost you, the violence, the choices, the stone face you had to wear to survive. But that kid with the hot chocolate, she cracked something open, and now everyone can see it. The vulnerability, the humanity. In our world, that's blood in the water. Vincent set his glass down carefully. You're right, I am vulnerable now, more human, less stone. And some ambitious soldier probably will try to take advantage of that. He looked at each of them directly. So I need to know now, are you 3 that soldier? Because if you are, let's handle this here. I'm too tired for drawn-out betrayals. The room went silent. Frank shifted uncomfortably. Marco looked hurt. Sal just stared. Boss, Sal finally said. We're not here to move against you. We're here because we're worried. About you. About the organization. About what happens when word gets out that you're cooperating with the FBI. Word is already out. Castellano knows. Webb knows. By tomorrow, everyone will know. Vincent pulled out his phone, showed them the text from Agent Rodriguez. The FBI is moving on Webb today. They'll bring in Castellano within 48 hours. My cooperation will be public record once it hits court. Jesus Christ, Frank muttered. You're not just vulnerable. You're radioactive. Nobody will want to work with someone wearing a wire. Good. Because I'm done with that work. Vincent's voice was flat. I've been meeting with the FBI for 6 months about transitioning everything to legitimate business. The clubs, the restaurants, the real estate. It all goes clean. No more protection rackets. No more loan sharking. No more violence, unless it's self-defense. You're walking away, Marco said slowly. From everything we built, I'm walking towards something better. Something Elena would recognize as worth building. Vincent gestured to the display case with its $3 and empty cup. 4 days ago, that little girl looked at me and saw someone worth saving. And I realized I'd spent 20 years becoming someone not worth saving. That ends now. Sal was quiet for a long moment. And if we don't want to go legitimate, if some of us built our lives on the old model and don't know how to be anything else, then you leave, with my blessing and a severance package that sets you up for life. No hard feelings, no retaliation. Vincent met each of their eyes. But if you stay with the new rules. We protect the neighborhood, not prey on it. We build legitimate businesses, not criminal enterprises. We become the kind of men that 7-year-olds don't have to be afraid of. Frank laughed once, bitter and disbelieving. You really think that's possible? You think we can just wash 20 years of blood off our hands and pretend to be legitimate businessmen? No. I think we carry the blood forever. But I think we can choose to stop adding to it. Vincent's voice softened. Elena used to say that change was always possible if you wanted it badly. Enough. I told her she was naive. Turns out she was just braver than me. Marco cleared his throat. For what it's worth, boss, I'm staying. You gave me a life when I had nothing. If you're going legitimate, I'll figure out how to go with you. Sal and Frank exchanged glances. We need time to think, Sal said finally. It's a lot. Take the time you need, but decide soon. Vincent stood. Because Castellano was right about one thing. Showing weakness makes you a target. And I just made myself the biggest target in the city. So anyone staying needs to be all in. No half measures, no hedging bets. After they left, Vincent stood alone in the empty club, looking at the display case. $3 and an empty hot chocolate cup. The price of his transformation and the cost of his vulnerability. His phone buzzed. A text from Bobby. Ms. Williams wants to talk to you. Says it's important. Should I bring her down? Vincent hesitated, then typed back. Give me 30 minutes. I'll come to her. At the Tribeca penthouse, Shanice had spent the day trying to process freedom. The debt was gone. The threat was neutralized. She could go home, go back to work, rebuild the life that had been on pause for 18 months. But something kept her from packing. Some question she couldn't name, circling the edges of her consciousness, like a bird looking for a place to land. Zara was asleep in the guest room when Vincent arrived, looking more exhausted than Shanice had ever seen him. The stone face showed cracks, not just vulnerability now, but actual weariness. Like the weight he'd been carrying for years had finally become too heavy. Bobby said you wanted to talk, Vincent said, accepting the coffee she offered. I wanted to understand. Shanice sat across from him, at the kitchen table. The same place where he'd shown her the evidence of fraud, where he'd revealed the FBI cooperation, where he'd asked her to trust him completely. Why you did this? Really why? And don't tell me it's just because Zara gave you $3. That might have been the spark, but there's more to it. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it could warm the cold places inside him. You're right, there is more. Tell me. He looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city lights. Elena and I tried for 3 years to have a baby. Multiple rounds of IVF, miscarriages. Finally, she got pregnant naturally. Everyone said it was a miracle. She was so happy, we both were. His voice went flat, emotionless in the way of people recounting unbearable pain. The pregnancy was complicated from the start. High blood pressure, preeclampsia. The doctors managed it carefully. She made it to 38 weeks. We thought we were safe. Shanice felt her throat tighten. She knew where this was going. During delivery, something went wrong. Amniotic fluid embolism, 1 in 40,000 chance. Her heart stopped. They got it started again, but... Vincent's hands tightened on the mug. She was oxygen deprived for too long. Brain damage. They kept her on life support for 18 hours, while we waited to see if she'd recover. She didn't. And the baby, our son, he didn't make it either. 20 minutes of life. That's all he got. Vincent, I'm so sorry. For 3 years after I couldn't feel anything. Went through the motions, ran the organization, made decisions, appeared functional. But inside I was stone. Complete stone. No warmth, no softness, nothing but cold calculation, and the kind of numbness that made violence easy, because I didn't care about consequences anymore. He finally looked at her. Then your daughter walked up to me with $3 and told me I looked like I'd lost something important. And she was right. I'd lost myself. Lost every piece of me that Elena loved. Became exactly the kind of man she'd spent years trying to save me from being. Shanice reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. She saw you anyway. Through all that stone, she saw the sad man underneath. 7-year-olds are smarter than we give them credit for. Vincent's voice cracked slightly. She reminded me that I had a choice. I could stay stone until it went all the way through, and there was nothing left worth saving. Or I could crack it open, let the warmth back in, become human again even if it hurt. Even if it made me vulnerable. Even if it meant losing the empire I'd built. Is that what's happening? You're losing your empire? Probably. My captains came to see me today. Told me people are saying I've gone soft, that I'm weak, that some ambitious soldier will try to take me out within 6 months. He smiled without humor. They're probably right. But you know what? I'd rather die human than live forever as stone. Shanice was quiet, absorbing this. The man sitting across from her wasn't the mobster who'd broken an enforcer's arm in a laundromat. He was just a grieving widower, who'd spent 3 years frozen, who'd been cracked open by a child's compassion, who was trying desperately to remember how to be warm before the stone consumed him completely. Elena would be proud of you, she said finally, for choosing warmth over stone. For protecting my daughter instead of exploiting her. For honoring her memory through action, instead of just grief. I hope so. Vincent stood, moved to the window. But I also know she'd want me to be smart about this. To protect the people who matter instead of just making grand gestures that get everyone killed. What does that mean? It means you and Zara need to go home tomorrow. Back to your apartment, your neighborhood, your life. The longer you stay here, the more people associate you with me. And association with me is becoming dangerous. You just canceled my debt and destroyed Castellanos' operation to protect us. Now you're saying we're in danger because we're associated with you? Yes, because protecting you made me vulnerable. And vulnerability makes me a target. And if someone comes after me, they might come after the people I care about first. Vincent turned to face her. I'm setting up security for your building. Bobby will do regular check-ins. You'll have my direct number, and Agent Rodriguez's number. But you need to go back to being anonymous. Being nobody important. That's the safest place to be. Shanice felt something twist in her chest. An emotion she couldn't quite name. Not attraction exactly, but connection. Recognition. The understanding that passed between two people, who'd both lost spouses too young, who'd both been drowning, who'd both been saved by a 7-year-old's fearless compassion. What about you? She asked quietly. Who keeps you safe? I've survived 20 years in this life. I'll survive whatever comes next. But his voice lacked conviction, and they both knew it. Vincent. She stood, moved closer. My husband used to say that the world was made of 2 kinds of people. Those who saw suffering and looked away, and those who saw it and couldn't help but try to fix it. You're not as stone as you think. Zara saw that 4 days ago. I see it now. And I think deep down, you see it too, maybe. Or maybe I'm just a criminal, trying to buy redemption with grand gestures. You're a grieving man trying to honor his wife's memory by becoming the person she believed you could be. That's not buying redemption, that's earning it. Shanice touched his arm gently. Thank you for everything. For seeing my daughter's kindness and choosing to protect it. For giving us our lives back. For being human enough to let a 7-year-old crack you open. Vincent covered her hand with his. Thank you for trusting me. For letting me prove that kindness doesn't always get punished. For raising a daughter who believes sad strangers deserve hot chocolate. They stood like that for a moment. 2 broken people connected by loss, and a 7-year-old's $3, trying to figure out how to be warm again in a world that rewarded stone. We should get some sleep, Shanice said finally. Tomorrow's a big day. Going home. Starting over. Figuring out what life looks like without debt crushing us. Yeah. Vincent moved toward the elevator. I'll have Bobby bring you home in the morning. And Shanice, if you ever need anything at all, you call. Promise me. I promise. After he left, Shanice returned to the kitchen table, to the spot where they'd sat in shared understanding of grief and transformation. She thought about Marcus, about the life they'd planned before cancer destroyed it. She thought about Elena, about the woman who'd believed people could change if they wanted to badly enough. And she thought about Vincent, about the stone face cracking open, about the warm parts fighting to survive, about a man willing to lose everything to honor his wife's memory and protect a 7-year-old's compassion. In the guest room, Zara slept peacefully, dreaming of hot chocolate and sad men, and the simple certainty that kindness could fix anything if you just gave it to the right person at the right time. She was right, Shanice realized. Kindness could fix things, could crack stone, could transform mobsters into protectors and debt into freedom and grief into something bearable. It just took $3, and the courage to see suffering instead of danger. The warm parts were winning. Slowly, painfully, with setbacks and threats and whispers of weakness, but winning. And tomorrow, Shanice and Zara would go home, not to the life they'd had before, but to something new. Something built on the foundation of a man who'd chosen to crack open, instead of staying stone forever. Something that looked, against all odds, like hope. Chapter 7. The Brooklyn Navy Yard sprawled against the night like a graveyard of industry, all rusted metal and forgotten purpose. Pier 6 jutted into the East River, its weathered boards groaning under their feet, as Vincent and Zara approached the meeting point Castellano had specified. Vincent's hand hovered near his jacket. "This feels wrong. Everything about this feels wrong," Zara muttered, her breath clouding in the February cold. The ambush came swift and surgical. Figures materialized from behind shipping containers and derelict cranes, forming a perfect semicircle that closed around them like a trap springing shut. 8 men, maybe 10. Vincent lost count as recognition flooded his system with ice-cold dread. Castellano stepped forward from the shadows, his silver hair catching the amber glow of distant streetlights. "Vincent, so predictable. Did you really think I'd negotiate?" Before Vincent could react, 2 men had seized Zara. She struggled, her elbow connecting with someone's ribs, but then cold steel pressed against her temple and everything stopped. "Let her go." Vincent's voice came out steady, despite the panic clawing up his throat. "This is between us." "No." Castellano's smile was cruel, practiced. "This is about leverage. This is about making you understand what happens when you cross me." He nodded toward Zara. "She's the only thing keeping you tethered to whatever humanity you've got left, isn't she? The social worker who thought she could save the monster." The gun pressed harder against Zara's head, forcing her face toward Vincent. Her eyes found his across the 10 feet of rotting pier between them, brown meeting blue in the kind of moment that stretches and crystallizes. "You didn't lose it all the way through yet, Mr. Vincent." Her voice was steady, impossibly steady for someone with a gun to her temple. "I can still see the warm part." Vincent's chest tightened. She was looking at him like she'd looked at him that first day in her cramped office. Like he was still worth saving, even now, even here. "Touching." Castellano's voice cut through the moment. "But sentiment won't save either of you. The question is, what are you willing to trade for her life, Vincent? Your territory? Your pride?" He paused, savoring each word. "Your life?" The East River lapped against the pier pilings below, cold and indifferent, as Vincent calculated odds that didn't exist. Chapter 8. The words came before Vincent fully registered he was speaking them. "Me for her. Let her go. Take me instead." Castellano's eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me? You want to punish someone? Punish me." Vincent took a step forward, hands rising slowly, palms empty and open. "She's got nothing to do with this world. She's a social worker who made the mistake of caring. That's her only crime." "Vincent, don't." Zara started, but the man holding her tightened his grip. Vincent took another step. The semicircle of men shifted, uncertain, hands moving toward weapons. But Vincent kept his eyes locked on Castellano, kept walking, with the slow deliberateness of a man who'd already made his choice. "You shoot a 7-year-old who tried to give me hot chocolate. You're a monster, not a gangster." Vincent's voice carried across the pier, cold and clear. "But I'm a legitimate target. Let's do this like men." Something flickered in Castellano's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. He studied Vincent for a long moment, then nodded to the man holding Zara. The gun left her temple. "Let her go," Castellano ordered. Zara stumbled forward as they released her, but Vincent didn't look at her. Couldn't. If he looked at her now, his resolve might crack. Castellano raised his own weapon, redirecting it from where it had been pointed casually downward, to center mass on Vincent's chest. The distance between them had closed to maybe 6 feet. At this range there'd be no surviving a shot. Vincent stood unflinching, hands still at his sides. The gun barrel looked enormous in the amber light, a perfect circle of ending. He could hear Zara breathing behind him, ragged and terrified. "You really think I won't pull this trigger?" Castellano asked. "I think you will." Vincent's voice was steady. "But you'll do it to me, not to her. That's the trade." The East River wind cut across the pier, carrying the smell of salt and oil and decay. Vincent had stood in rooms with men holding guns before, had felt the weight of imminent death pressing against his sternum. But never like this. Never with someone worth dying for watching. Castellano's finger moved to the trigger. "Any last words?" Vincent finally let himself glance back at Zara. "Get out of here. Don't look back." Chapter 9. The first shout came from behind the shipping containers. "FBI, drop your weapons." Floodlights erupted across Pier 6, turning night into searing white day. Agents poured from every angle, 20, 30 of them, vests emblazoned with yellow letters, weapons raised and steady. Castellano's head whipped around, confusion blooming into rage. "What the?" Agent Rodriguez emerged from the chaos, her dark hair pulled back tight, her voice carrying authority that made grown men freeze. "Antonio Castellano, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other charges we're still counting." Vincent hadn't moved. The gun was still pointed at his chest, but Castellano's attention had fractured. "How?" Castellano's voice was barely a whisper. Vincent reached slowly into his shirt, pulling the small wire from beneath the fabric. The tiny microphone caught the light. 6 months, Antonio. Every meeting, every threat, everybody you ordered dropped. You, Castellano's face went purple. Already uploaded to the DOJ and the Washington Post. Vincent's smile was thin and humorless. Insurance policy. The recordings went live the moment I walked onto this pier. Rodriguez moved in, her team converging on Castellano's men. One agent, Jenkins, the one Vincent had suspected for months, was suddenly being cuffed alongside the gangsters. His phone buzzed insistently against his hip as someone, somewhere up the chain of command, realized their pet agent had just been burned. The gun finally lowered from Vincent's chest. Zara broke through the perimeter of agents, stumbling across the weathered boards. She crashed into Vincent with enough force to make him stagger, her arms wrapping around him like she was trying to confirm he was solid, real, alive. The warm part won. She breathed against his shoulder, and Vincent felt something in his chest crack open. Not breaking, but expanding. His arms came up slowly, tentatively, returning the embrace. Over her head he watched agents zip-tie Castellano, watched his former handler get read his rights with mechanical precision. Then Vincent did something he hadn't done since he was 7 years old, standing in his mother's kitchen with burns on his hands from her cigarettes. He knelt. On the cold, splintered boards of Pier 6, Vincent Moretti looked up at Zara Chen and spoke truth. You were right about the hot chocolate. It helped. Thank you. Above them, the February sky held no stars, but for the first time in 30 years, Vincent didn't feel like he was drowning in darkness. Chapter 10. Spring came to Little Italy like a promise kept. The Saturday sun painted Mulberry Street gold, and the air smelled of espresso and fresh bread instead of winter's harsh bite. Café Palermo looked different now. The old cafe's bones remained, but the interior had been gutted and rebuilt. Sleek desks, where marble tables once stood, filing cabinets instead of pastry cases. A sign above the door read, Zara Williams Community Fund in elegant script, named for the girl who'd seen warmth where everyone else saw ice. Shanice emerged from the office, locking the door behind her. As executive director, she spent her Saturdays helping families escape the predatory debt cycles that had once fed Vincent's empire. 32 families freed in 8 months. The numbers mattered to her in a way Vincent was still learning to understand. Ready? She asked, and Vincent nodded, reaching for her hand. The gesture still felt foreign after a lifetime of trusting no one, touching no one. But Shanice's fingers laced through his with practiced ease. Zara, 8 now, taller and still fearless, bounced ahead of them down the sidewalk. Can we get cannoli? After lunch, Shanice called, but then Zara stopped. The hot chocolate vendor had set up his cart on the corner. The same battered metal box Vincent remembered from that December morning that felt like another life. Vincent approached slowly, pulling out his wallet. $3 bills, the same ones he'd carried every single day for 8 months, transferred from pocket to pocket like a talisman. He'd never spent them. 3 hot chocolates, he said. The vendor's eyes widened with recognition. Mr. Moretti. Vincent handed him the bills, then knelt beside Zara. Your $3 changed my life, kid. His voice caught slightly. Turns out, I was the one who needed help. Zara's grin was pure sunshine. I told you hot chocolate helps. They walked together down Mulberry Street, former mob boss, empowered nurse, fearless child. An unlikely family assembled from broken pieces and impossible hope. Vincent carried the hot chocolate carefully, feeling its warmth seep through the paper cup into his palm. Behind them, the Zara Williams Community Fund sign caught the light. Ahead, the street opened into spring brightness, full of people who no longer crossed to the other sidewalk when they saw Vincent coming. He was learning their names, learning to be someone worth knowing. Shanice squeezed his hand. Zara chattered about school and kickball, and the new puppy her grandmother was considering. And Vincent Moretti, who'd once believed warmth was weakness, walked into the sunshine and finally understood what redemption tasted like. It tasted like hot chocolate and second chances. The $3 hadn't just bought a snack. It had bought a second chance. And as the sun set over Seoul, casting a golden glow over the city, the sad man finally felt at home. The end. Hit the subscribe button to subscribe if you love this story, and also comment where you are watching from.